Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for Promoting the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately called IPA-USA. IPA-USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association. As part of our efforts to advocate for play, we've entered our third year of taping Porch Play Chats. And these are conversations on a variety of topics with folks who are just as passionate about play as we are. You can find all of our Porch Play Chats on our website at IPAUSA.org. There's two ways to get to them. You can click on our YouTube channel on the top right, or you can go to our advocacy tab and search for Porch Play Chats, and then you can see the 2020, 2021, and coming soon, the 2022 Porch Play Chats. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm the president of IPA-USA, and with me on the porch is Lisa Murphy, one of our board members. Good morning.
Hello, good morning. Or good afternoon, depending on where you are.
Yeah, wherever you are. And with us today is Shelley Newstead. Shelley has worked in Playwork for more than 30 years as a practitioner, a trainer, an author, an editor, a publisher, and a researcher. She's currently an Action Research Fellow at a university in Brisbane, Australia, and the managing editor of the International Journal of Playwork Practice.
Yay.
And the series editor in Routledge Advances in Playwork Research Series. Oh my goodness. Shelley is also the president of the International Council for Children's Play and the managing director of Common Threads, a social enterprise which develops playwork theory and practice internationally. Shelley created the PARS model of playwork practice as part of her doctoral research. PARS is now being used around the world to empower adults to let kids be kids. Shelley, we're so glad to have you. So my question to you is, since this is new to me, I mean, I know about Playwork, but I
talk about it constantly when we're not on recording.
She does. And so can you describe to us what the PARS network is?
Yes. So PARS is, well, it's a bit of a surprise, to be honest, to me, because PARS, as you just said, was developed for my PhD. And essentially what PARS is it's a conceptual model of playwork practice, or it was designed to be a conceptual model of playwork practice. And it was a sort of something that I drew up to finish my PhD in a sort of very neat way. But actually what happened was that I was working in Hong Kong at the time when I was doing my PhD, and I was trying out just little bits of the PARS model just to see really for my own benefit if it made sense to me, if I could explain it, if I could articulate it. And what started to happen was people went into settings and then came back and said, oh, this works. Oh, this is useful. Oh, hang on a minute, can we have some more of this? And so it sort of grew really and sort of began to take on a life of its own.
But it sounds like it was very organic.
Hugely organic,
yeah.
and still is. And you know, everything sort of comes from the PARS community. So we have this lovely way of working together. Where somebody suggests something and somebody else says, that's a good idea, I've got some skills and expertise, and we all just sort of, you know, muck in really around the world, which is fantastic. I mean, it's one of the great things that, you know, taking training online has done for us. It's enabled us to really work as a team internationally, which is fantastic. So PARS is really a model of playwork practice. And some people will know that Playwork began in the adventure playgrounds in the UK just after the Second World War. But PARS is a bit different to sort of traditional understandings of playwork, I guess, because very often playwork in the UK is associated with free play. And this idea of advocating for children's play, which is part of what we do as PARS practitioners. But PARS practitioners have a bit of a bigger objective, which is this thing about letting kids be kids. Because what I found when I went into the research, when I went into the adventure playground literature written by the original playground pioneers, is that they didn't really have this adult defined mission to help children play. They had this sort of mission for creating time and space for kids to do what mattered to them. So they had this broader objective, which was about children being children and adults being adults. And the problem is that sometimes if adults are around children, adults can get in kids' ways. And they start saying things that are, you know, designed to be helpful, but really they're not, perhaps always from a children's point of view. And so what the PARS model does is not think about children or play. Actually, it thinks about what the adults do and very often what they don't do when we talk about play work practice. So it's a model that refers to the adults and not the kids. And that's quite unusual in play work because very often, you know, play workers concern themselves about children's play. We have well, the hoodie I'm wearing, actually, my PARS hoodie, one of my favourite quotes from Jack Lambert.
Shameless self-promotion.
Yay!
Woo!
Actually, it's just my most comfortable hoodie and it's freezing here in the UK and that's why I'm not on my porch.
What does it say? Sorry, I interrupted you. What does it say?
I wear it often, that's fine. But on the back of my hoodie is my favourite quote from Jack Lambert, 1974. He said, "Play is the business of children themselves." And he was one of the adventure playground pioneers and who were very clear that children had their own lives, children had their own interests, children had their own concerns and priorities, and very often they clashed with adult concerns and priorities. And one of the things that they were really concerned about as adventure playground pioneers was, hang on a minute, we need to be here, we set these spaces up, but now we're here in the children's time and space. How do we minimise our impact on what children are doing? And how do we be helpful from a children's perspective, not necessarily from an adult's perspective? So in PARS, we're really, that's the thing that the model tries to help adults to get to grips with, which is about a balance. Sometimes kids need us, of course they do, and sometimes we have to step in. But there's very often times where actually we don't, or we shouldn't, or it's just unnecessary. And how do we make those judgments? And how do we then explain those judgments to ourselves, to our colleagues, and to other adults who might have a sort of slightly different way of looking at practice than we do, and different objectives, different professional objectives.
This sounds very much like the chapter in my book where I talk about being a facilitator and not an instigator. How do we as practitioners, whether play workers, whether early childhood people, childcare, preschool, pre-K, kindergarten teachers, how do we create a space where we trust that the children are able to direct their own discovery and investigation without feeling that we need to be in the middle? And I'm sure many of the people watching and listening know their favorite quotes, right? How do we be a guide on the side, not the sage on the stage? And how do we wrestle with feeling like we're still needed, but we don't maybe feel like we're doing anything? And I know that's a big struggle for a lot of practitioners here in the States. It's like, I'm not doing anything. And I'm like, but then that means, as Kristen was a past Porch Play Chat guest. And she said that, she's like, when I tell my staff that when they say, I don't feel like I'm doing anything, but all that beautiful work is going on in front of you, she says to them, that means you've done exactly what you need to do. And it sounds like that is at the heart and soul, and correct me, Shelley, of what y'all are doing. How do we become comfortable in that space as an adult in a children's environment?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to really accepting that we as adults are not necessarily needed. That actually, if we get the environment right in terms of meeting the children's needs, whatever those needs are for the children we're working with today, not the children we worked with last week or last year, but these children right here, right now in front of us, if we get the environment right for what they need, then actually they shouldn't need us that much. You know, they might need help to fix something. They might need help to know that it's nearly home time. They might need help if, you know, they need some first aid or whatever. But actually, from a PARS perspective, it's about creating that environment, which is the children's time and space, and then trying to make sure that the adults don't have an unnecessary impact on that time and space. So I guess it's not about, we don't really sort of look to guide or facilitate anything in particular, except that child's time and space And we talk about, despite the fact that we are adults in a child's world, because let's face it, there's an awful lot of places around the world where children have to spend their time in supervised settings. They don't have the luxury, the freedom to go outside and play without the oversight of adults. So
Shelley, I have a question about how, so we have this, it's a big problem, right? That adults want to keep kids safe. Adults, I know, oh my goodness. It's like, wow, all the time. No, we have to keep them safe. Oh no, they can't run on the playground. My goodness, they might fall and skin their knee, you know. And so we're at IPA-USA really trying to give them another way to look at children's play. And so as children, as you're working with the adults, what are some of the techniques, one or two techniques that you use that some of our listeners might be able to use with their staff that help them recognize that it's their stuff that they're having to work through and they're interfering with children's development because of their stuff? How do you get them to recognize that and work through that?
Yeah, it's a big issue, and particularly where people have been trained in other approaches to working with children, which are all absolutely valid. I mean, in my professional lifetime, I've done all sorts of things with children and played all sorts of different roles, including girl guides and singing teacher, and I've done a number of different and also I'm a qualified play therapist. But in the PARS community, we talk about taking your other hat off and putting your PARS hat on. And when you're wearing your PARS hat, then you have to become very reflexive. So at the heart of the PARS model is reflexivity. And that really requires adults to be very open and honest and conscious about what's going on for them and for the kids in the here and now. So in the model, we have various observing and listening and reflecting techniques so that people can ask themselves questions rather than necessarily always just jumping in and giving the automatic, what we call the standard adult response. Yeah, stop that, don't do that. Or sometimes adults think they're being helpful because they ask things like, oh, that's an interesting colour green. How did you make that? Or, do you think that's
and the kid looks up like, who are you? Like,
yeah.
Where did you come from?
And then it goes all that play flow. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's really going back from a PARS perspective. It's going back to the aim of the what we're about, which is about compensating children for the presence of adults in their time and space. So when we ask that question, oh, hello, Johnny, how are you? Did you have a good day at school today? When they're immersed in whatever it is they're doing, is that helpful to the child? Is that achieving our aim of helping children to compensate children for our presence? Well, no, it probably isn't actually, because if they're immersed in what they're doing, then actually they don't need us to ask them how their school day was. So that
it sounds like the adult's ego really needs to kind of be kept in check, and there might be a lot of reflective piece or a lot of reflective, I don't know, process that might be required for some people in order to do that work effectively.
And I think for some people that works, and for some people that doesn't. And that's not a judgment.
No.
It's just that some people are really good teachers. I'm not. I couldn't teach to save my life. And children need teachers in their life, right? It's just that I'm not one of them. So I'm really grateful that there's people who have those objectives when they're working with children and can work in that way. But some people can't work in the PARS way, because it actually does really require people to be able to say, I think I made a mistake there, or I don't think that was very useful. And for some people, that's quite an uncomfortable position to be in. I had a lovely woman on a course once, one of the pilot PARS courses in the UK actually, and we were having a very similar discussion, and she said, I've realised, she said, I just don't shut up. She said, I feel like I've got to be useful all the time. She said, I can't walk from one end of the room to the other without saying, hello, how was your day? And, oh, well done, you're colouring in nicely. And da-da-da-da. She said, from this week, I'm going to just shut up. I'm just going to walk across the room. And the next week she came back to the class and I said, right, Jane, how did you do? And she said, well, I started off well with good intentions and I knew I had to shut up. She said, but I took 2 steps and I couldn't help myself. She said, I just, and week after week after week, this went on. But it was lovely because it wasn't, we're not about judging people in the PARS community, but it was a lovely process where she was making herself aware of her processes, her habitual habits as an adult, and absolutely doing her darndest to try and overcome those sorts of standard adult responses. And I think, going back to your question, Deb, it is about practice. And it is about getting ourselves out of some of those habits, if that's the way in which we choose to work. I mean, as I said before, it's not for everybody and it's not appropriate, at all times for all people. But if we've got our PARS hat on, one of the things that helps us is practicing and actually going back and reflecting and chatting to colleagues or going back to the training course the week before or whatever and saying, oh, blow, I tried that and it just didn't work because, in Jane's case, I couldn't keep my mouth shut. I'm having a bit of a laugh and a joke and say, well, we're not all perfect. Let's have another go this week. And being part of that supportive community really helps that sort of authenticity and honesty, I think, in people. That, it's not a case of, oh, you must be a bad play worker or a bad human being because you didn't get it right first time. It is that process of, becoming aware of ourselves and what we're comfortable with and what we can do as practitioners.
It sounds, Deb, hold on.
Okay.
It sounds like the PARS model can influence people working with children to some degree, regardless of where that setting is. And that's, I really appreciate that you kind of defined that a little bit more specifically than I had heard before. Like, it's okay to take a little bit. Like, if you're not a play worker, if you're a 2nd grade teacher and you can just pull from here to influence your work, like, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. I like that.
And what I hear, Shelley, is that it's so supportive, right? You're not a failure, right? We're practicing, just like children practice things over and over and over again. Repetition helps us change a former practice or deepen our understanding of something. And one of the things that I think has happened in the US is because the focus has shifted from allowing children opportunities to be free and play and choose. We've gotten into this, we have to get them ready for, the future life. And so that has then led to lots of evaluation tools where, how many open-ended questions did you ask in the last hour, right? So teachers are constantly interrupting the flow. If children have child choice time, they're interrupting the flow to get those open-ended questions in. And so I think this is helpful in giving people the perspective that when you put on your PARS hat, which I hope anyone who is listening would think about exploring this model, and I'll put the website on for Shelley's website. Anyone who's interested in exploring this model, you take off that evaluation, I have to do a checklist, and you put on the PARS hat and you just try it out, right? Just try it, for an hour a day, try it. And then maybe what Shelley said in the very beginning, oh, it works.
Yeah.
Then maybe try it for 2 hours in a day. But know that you're not going to be successful right away because we have all these habits
that we need to shed.
Yeah, we just need to shove them off because they're really not beneficial to children's play, right? I love what you said about, is that helpful to the child? I love that. I'm going to coin that phrase. because I always say you're interfering with, whatever. And I like, is that helpful? Much better.
Well, I like just doing this every now and again. Just feel like, And what does Alfie Cohen say out of Boston? Terrific teachers have teeth marks on their tongues, right? Because either you catch yourself, or you don't say it, or you think about, is this serving? And who is this for? But yeah.
And I think one of the things that's amazed me about the use of this model internationally is the range of settings that people use it in. And it is because we do have this understanding of Playwork as a practice rather than as a setting. And that's something that differentiates.
Nice.
Well, that was a little bit of an aha for me, Shelley. Hold on, I'm going to write that down.
We've been writing. That's what I'm doing when I look down. I'm writing.
Say it again, Shelley. Playwork as a practice, not a setting, or did I get it the wrong way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in the model, Playwork's conceptualized as a practice. It's something that adults do, rather than a space in which a certain range of activities takes place. Mm-hmm. And that's quite a shift in terms of how Playwork is described and defined, because it puts the onus on the adults to think then about wherever they are, how can I compensate a bit more for my presence and my potential adult impact on the children in their time and space. And that time and space could be in a hospital, it could be in a zoo, it could be at lunchtime in schools. So PARS practitioners work in huge different settings. They don't have to be called play workers, and 99% of them are not. They don't have to work in Playwork spaces. PARS practitioners work anywhere where children spend their free time. And that might be things like after school programs or summer camps. It could be prison visiting. So some PARS practitioners work in prisons, for example, with children, because we see it as a practice. We see it as something that we can do within our other job roles. So if you work in a domestic refuge, for example, of course, 90% of your time is going to be looking after the families who are in that domestic refuge. But for 10% of your time, when you have free play time or family time or whatever, you can put your PARS hat on and think, right, at the moment, my aim is to give these kids some time and space to do what matters to them, to let kids be kids. Right, that's my aim for this particular session. How are we going to do that? And then later on, you're going to go back to whatever it is that you do in your, normal day job. So we talk about PARS as a complementary practice, that it can add to what you already do. It doesn't have to replace what you already do. Yeah?
Love it.
Almost like a little bit of a lifestyle choice, right? Like, so I'm bringing this to probably most of my life, and depending on the specific situation, might determine the degree of how big my PARS hat is that day. Oh, I am so signing up for your class. I was really wanting, I was so excited to talk to you, and I knew I wanted to sign up for that class. And now you push me over the edge. You can actually, and I'm shameless self-promoting here for Shelley, you can sign up and take this class.
We'd love to have you, Lisa. And it's interesting when you say about, how much PARS because one of the things that I found when I was working in Hong Kong and then mainland China is parents can use this model as well. Mm-hmm. And again, I wasn't a parent at the time. I am now. I'm a stepmom. But I always said, this isn't for parents because I'm not a parent and I'm not going to, tell people how to parent. This is crazy. But actually what we found is that people who were coming on the courses in China from the hospitals and the play buses and the after school programs were also parents. And they were the people who were coming back and telling fantastic tales of just little small things like, well, I live in a very small apartment in Hong Kong and I let the children jump on my bed. And how that really made a huge difference in terms of family dynamics, because they'd applied the PARS model, not just in their work setting as they were being trained, but also at home. And
Mhm.
people were coming back to the courses with these lovely stories of, first my husband was horrified, I told him the story, so you told us, and I showed him the model, and then he said it was all right to let the children jump on the bed as well. And so so in terms of parenting, it's an area that some of our trainers are actually looking at the moment. Of course, you can't be a PARS parent all the time. I mean, the kids would never go to bed, they'd never get fed, they'd never get to school.
Right. But sometimes you just got to get on the bus,
Absolutely. And so, and again, so we talk about, well, take your PARS hat on and, take it off and put it on. You can't be a PARS parent all the time. But actually, even in your parenting role, there are times where you could decide to introduce that approach a little bit. In fact, I have to tell you, my 13-year-old stepson, if he's worked out when I'm a PARS practitioner and when I'm not as a parent. So sometimes you'll hear him say something like, "Oh, Shelley's got that voice on. He's not being a play worker anymore. Better do what she says." And there must be something about my tone or the way I react that says I definitely don't have my PARS.
You're like,
I need you to go to bed. Yes.
Well, what I appreciate about that is that kind of a baby step approach, right? Right now I can say yes. One of the Rusty Keeler has been on the porch with us many times. Like, what part of this can I say yes to? So maybe as a metaphor, it becomes a little easier for some people to say yes to something because they've metaphorically put this hat on, and I don't know, it seems very user friendly.
Yeah,
and
it does.
to so many different roles. Like, it's not just teachers or parents, or like, it can be anybody. You could put your PARS Playwork hat on metaphorically just while you were in Target walking by somebody who was watching their kid have a meltdown, and you could be like, that.
Absolutely. We did a lovely course with Bucknell University last year, and it was trainee teachers, because again, I started off by saying this wasn't, designed to work in an education environment. I don't know anything about education. And some wonderful people at Bucknell University took it into their teacher training education and combined it with a forest school approach. And
Oh,
so
wow.
then put PARS and into a forest school environment. And we did the PARS training course, and off they went into the woods to put it all into practice. And it was lovely to see how those approaches combined. And the trainee teachers were saying, yeah, actually, this is not something I'm going to do full time, but actually, these are the experiences I'm going to take away with me from this particular training opportunity. And these are the things I'm going to remember when I'm in my classroom teaching. And so, there weren't going to be PARS practitioners in the classroom, but certain things that happened and certain ways of looking at situations that we covered in the training course really helped them to think a bit more from a child's perspective, and to take that adult hat off a bit sometimes, and try to engage with children at their level rather than always from the standard teaching perspective.
So Shelley, what I see is a fabulous model, because you're giving people choice when to put on their hat, when to take it off, right? And you're giving them opportunities to practice without any negativity, right? So they can come back to you and say, oh, it didn't work. It worked for 2 minutes. And then I went back to my old habits. And you say, well, you tried for 2 minutes and we'll try again. Right?
Good for trying.
Yes, it's the trying piece that I think that's the supportive piece that you're lifting up with people, that so that they don't become discouraged and they recognize, ooh, boy, this is something I do all the time. Let me see if I can start to change that one thing, right? Baby steps. And we always go back to baby steps, but it's their choice which thing, right? It's not like, here's the PARS curriculum. I know there is one, but it's not, here's your checklist that you need to work through, right? Here are the techniques. Here's the reflection. You choose. So again, it's a model of best practice, right? Because we want children to have choice. Adults should have choice.
Yeah. We always say that, we can't tell you what to do in any given situation. And there's two reasons for that, really. And first is that we're not there. So,
Right.
as a practitioner, it's only you who can make a judgment about whether that child waving a stick is, going to rescue the fairy dragon or about to kill somebody. You have to make that judgment. Often people come on courses and say, well, is it all right for children to wave sticks? And I always say, well, I don't know.
It depends.
I'm not there. we have this lovely phrase, there is no answer, it depends. I mean, obviously, if it's going to be, a serious emotional or physical injury issue, then, we do say, yes, there is an answer. But 95% of the time, a practitioner has to make that judgment in the here and now. So what we teach is how to gather the data, if you like, how to listen, observe and reflect, how to make that judgment, how to express that judgment. So the PARS model gives people language to articulate the judgment they made. And of course, then if you have the language, then actually you can reflect on that judgment. Yeah, that was an interesting thing I did there. And actually, with hindsight, now I've got time to think about it, would I do the same thing again? Maybe I would, and maybe I wouldn't. And the reason that, this is a supportive way of learning this approach is that it goes to the heart of the PARS model, which is that in PARS, adults are not the experts. It's the children's time and space. So the children are the experts in what's going on, why they're doing what they're doing, how they're doing what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And it's not necessarily always obvious or clear to adults why children are doing things in that way. So we start from the basis that we want people to feel like that in children's time and space. We don't have all the answers. We don't know everything. We don't know an awful lot of nothing, really, when it comes to children's time and space. And that's the model that we teach people to think on, to learn from, which is actually, if we're not experts in children's time and space, we have to have this questioning, open, authentic approach to be able to say, I wonder what is going on. I wonder what I'm thinking. I wonder what they're thinking. I wonder what they're doing. I wonder what's going to happen next. So it's a process of questioning and not knowing the answers. And I think going back to an earlier question, Lisa, that's why some people feel uncomfortable with this type of approach, because very often adults, we're taught to know answers, right? That is one of our jobs in the world. we have to know, we have to be in control, and that is one of our jobs as adults, to make things happen. We turn that on its head and say, if we're going to be in a child's time and space, we have to be comfortable with not knowing, and thinking about that and what that means. And so that's the approach that we take on training, to encourage and support people saying, I don't know, I haven't got a clue. Okay, well, let's have a guess. Let's figure it out. Let's try and see, where it's going or where it might
Hey,
be.
Deb, how about you have this start to be a part of the community college class that you're teaching?
Yeah, hello. And Shelley, one of the things that we have in the US that Sandy Peterson and Donna Whitmer, one of my grad school professors, came up with was watch, and we do this in an infant and toddler college course, right? Watch, ask yourself, adapt your interactions, right? So it's
Pause. It's a pause.
Pause, yes. Don't react. Just, yes.
And
Yes.
sometimes you might do something. Sometimes you might shut your mouth. Yes. Sometimes the doing something might just be getting another cup of coffee, because you realize that right now you don't need to be all up in their business. I think one of the things here in the States that people struggle with is just thinking that by being on the side that they're not now doing something of value. And especially for the listeners and the people that we work with who are childcare providers specifically, they're already on, unfortunately, that lowest rung of the, respect ladder when it comes to working with children. And so we're always wanting to make sure that people see that what we do is of value. So if we're not doing anything, am I adding to somebody's misperception that, anybody could do this job, when really, if you had a camera inside my brain of what was going on, you would be like, this is the most exhausting job ever.
Well, and I think the other big piece is they have the stupid checklists, right? So they feel like they have to be.
Yes, and I'm going to interrupt
something.
you because the cerebral process is more in depth and more valid than the stupid checklist that is so superficial. The stuff going on in here, when somebody looking in the window thinks that I'm not doing anything, what's going on here is of so much more value than, did I ask an open-ended question? Tell me about your weekend. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
But what I'm observing over here takes that.
And I think that comes back to adults understanding that, actually kids have got stuff going on in their lives as well. And that might not be as obvious to us as adults. It might not even seem as valid sometimes than, whatever objectives we're trying to achieve. But actually for those kids, it is very valid and very obvious about what they want to do with their time. And just going back to something we were talking about earlier, this is why we don't focus as PARS practitioners on play, because actually there's an awful lot of other things that kids want to do, in the few hours that they've got free in the after school program that isn't playing. They might want to chat to their mates. They might want to, do some homework because it's actually really noisy at home and they can't get the homework done and they're really interested in this.
But Shelley, I'm going to interrupt you. I would argue that that's still play to some degree because the child still chose to do it, right? It's that freely chosen piece of it. So I would still say to some degree, it would be play. You going to push back a little?
Yeah, we don't really get into those sorts of debates. Okay. Actually, we sidestep all of that in PARS because we don't use the freely chosen, personally directed, intrinsically motivated definition. It's traditionally used in Playwork here. We use the lovely description of play by Joe Frost, which is play bubbles up from inside the child. Instead of as a result of adult directives. And that for me is much clearer. I think that's a lovely quote because it really does talk about the sort of play that is very child-led, child-directed, child-orientated, however you want to describe that. And it doesn't get into all those, very difficult debates about what is personally chosen, freely, motivated, whatever it is that it is.
Oh, now I'm really signing up. Come on, Deb.
I
Let's go. Deb and I are both going to sign up.
Let's do it.
Play that Shelley inside the child instead of as a result of adult directives. And that for me just nails it. That we don't have to have debates about whether homework or making fires or whatever is play.
Is play.
Actually, does it come from the child or does it not? And that's it.
And that's it.
How clear cut is that? That's going to make the rest of this week conversation a lot easier. Did it come from the child or not? None.
It is. Shelley, thank you so much.
Thank you, Shelley.
Absolutely incredible. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to close this out, but don't go anywhere. To learn more about Porch Play Chats, please visit IPA-USA.org. And I hope you'll think about joining us because our advocacy for play is strong and we have fabulous things on the website that will help you. So until next time, keep on playing.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.